All right. Hello, everybody. I know I skipped last week for the happiness coaching. Today, I'm going to make it up to you. Today is going to be a bit of a longer training, and I'm going to break down something that is a little bit more advanced. And we're going to walk through this live. This isn't scripted, so this is kind of doing this on the fly. So it'll give you an idea of what it's like to work with me and to deal with me as a coach. If this is your first time joining me, my name is Tina. I'm a happiness coach, and I help people deal with the emotional side of business. So I help business owners with this. And I do this through a trauma-informed change management approach. And you might be going, well, what has that got to do with anything? Tina, like, trauma, business, like, why am I having to deal with this? Here's the thing, is business is actually very easy. It's systems, it's processes, it's logical, it's streamlined, it is this input equals this result. And that is the easy stuff. And if it was that easy, then everybody would be able to do that. But the problem is human emotions get in the way. And people who have not done inner work, that causes all kinds of problems in business. And change management is one of the ways to be able to help mitigate those challenges. Oh, thank you so much for the roses. So being able to mitigate those challenges and being able to understand both on a personal level the inner work that is required and what you need to do to be able to help not only yourself overcome those challenges and how to help the people on your team, your customers, your vendors, everybody. Because if you have a business, the only reason to have a business is to be able to solve problems. And who are we solving the problems for? It's people. And the problem is people are often the problem. So it's very cyclical. It kind of goes in on itself. So bear with me as I try to get some of these thought processes and my problem is my mind works too fast sometimes, and trying to slow it down in a way that I can explain it to somebody else. And it reminds me of a story that my mom used to tell about me as a child, of trying to, where I get something and then I get frustrated because I'm trying to explain it to somebody else. And if they don't get it as quickly as I do, then I get frustrated. And she tells this story of how I was a toddler, maybe 3 or 4 years old, and there was an infant that the babysitter was dealing with, and they were trying to tell this little infant to take this bow and put it in the back of this toy fire truck. And I was sitting there watching as the baby didn't quite get it. Now, I didn't quite get it either because I'm 3 years old, but I didn't also understand my level of intelligence and knowing that there was a mismatch. And so what happened was I got frustrated. I went over, I grabbed the fire truck, I grabbed the bow, I slammed it in the back of the fire truck, and then I threw the fire truck at the kid, saying to them, there, that's what they're trying to tell you. So for me to try and remember to slow things down so that I can break it down and be able to explain this in a way that other people can understand. So there's a scenario that I want to be able to go through. I had heard this, and this isn't a personal attack on anybody. I just thought this would be a good teaching opportunity to kind of break down how emotions play into this, and we're going to walk through how you can solve this from either side. So it depends on how are we approaching this challenge and how do we break down the emotional component to actually get to a resolution that actually works. Because this can happen on both sides, and the problem is a lot of times we're not aware of our own side. We have our own blind spots, and it's too easy to just get frustrated and grab the fire truck and throw it at the other person saying they don't understand. Well, of course they don't understand. They're coming at it from a completely different level of comprehension, and being able to recognize our side and their side. So now, if you haven't joined my Facebook group, a lot of the training that I'm going to go through today is more advanced, and it breaks down. I'm going to be drawing in different components, and I'm going to be referencing those now. So if I lose you in this process, I want you to go to the Happiness Coach Facebook group, request to join. This has a mini 8-module training in there, completely free. I want you to consume that and be able to use that for personal tools that you can use for your own personal happiness, but this also translates to various aspects of business and being able to break this down in a change management approach. So, the Happiness Coach Facebook group, please join that, and we're going to go through. So here's the scenario that we're going to go through, and the way that I'm recording this and the way that I'm doing this, I'm going to have my back to you as I write on the whiteboard and we go through this process, and I'm going to try to break this down so that you can see this from various perspectives, okay? So the scenario that we're going to go through, and I'm going to give credit to Layla Hermosi. I was watching one of her, I think it was an Instagram one, where she's talking about how there was a manager that liked to yell at people. Yells. Okay? So there's this manager that likes to yell at people, right? And they also, when they started the company, they wanted to become a CEO. They wanted to be part of Layla's ecosystem. They wanted to be a CEO like her, right? Okay. And Layla's like, okay, fine, that's great. I like your ambition, all of that kind of stuff. And so, but this guy likes to, lose his temper, and he loses and yells at the team. And so she's like, okay, well, we're going to talk to you. We're going to go through that stuff. And I think this happens a lot in corporate, where we'll talk to somebody, we'll call out their behavior and say, hey, this isn't really good. This is what we need you to do instead. And so you end up sitting back and you watch their behavior. And, 3 or 4 days go by and they end up yelling again. They lose their shit. Okay? So that is the scenario that we're going to kind of break down in a change management approach, and how emotions and dealing with this from both sides actually, how we can break this down, how we can look at this to solve this from both sides, okay? So I look at things a little bit different than most people, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it is what it is. So we have a manager. I'm envisioning a scenario that maybe they were brought on because they have good structure, they have discipline, who knows. And I think a lot of times military kind of tactics happen in business. They're leveraged quite well. My background is transport and logistics, worked with a lot of military people over the years. Their structure, their discipline, their set way of doing things is very productive in business. Very, very productive. However, there's some drawbacks, right? Military tactics require war, so there's a bit of an enemy element, and so that can end up causing a breakdown in business, right? When you're trying to build a cohesive team, when you're trying to foster teamwork and camaraderie and stuff. So maybe this guy is operating on different structure, right? So It's all about structure, discipline. If they come from a military background, then to them, yelling at you is not a big deal, right? Especially like if they're a Marine or something like that. Marine is like, oh, I can yell at you and it's not even a thing, right? Because they've gone through different conditioning. So they have different backgrounds, different filters that they're going to process things through, right? They're going to see that in a completely different perspective than somebody who hasn't been in the military, right? So, but maybe there's still the value of structure, discipline, organization, following set processes, chain of command, hierarchy. You don't question whether or not, if you've been told to do something, you don't question it, you don't second guess, you just implement, you execute, right? So if you're coming from that kind of background, completely different operating system, completely different way of being, right? So there's a whole transition process if you're going to go to a CEO level, right? Because you can't just dictate, you can't just implement and assume everybody is operating on that same operating system, right? So now this person, if they are getting, let me rewind this a little bit. So one of the concepts that I teach is there are two ways of operating. There is fear and there is love. Fear is an illusion. Love is the only thing that's real. So anybody is operating in this, they're operating in an illusion. Now there's also 4 stages of fear, and the first stage of fear is anger. So when somebody gets triggered into anger, meaning they're yelling, they've been triggered into a fear state. So if they are constantly, maybe every 3-4 days, they fall into this state of fear, they default to their old mechanisms that have served them. Whatever reason they joined military or they maybe fell back into this conditioned way of operating that actually served them. This was actually beneficial, right? For them to operate in this way. So it's easy to fall back into our default modes. And we all have default modes that we will fall back into. Maybe it's got nothing to do with military. Maybe it's got to do with somebody grew up in an environment where their dad was abusive. They yelled, they lost their temper, and maybe they're trying their best not to be like their dad. They don't want to be that super critical, abusive, always yelling kind of dad, right? So they avoid operating like that. They avoid speaking up, they avoid saying things, they avoid boundaries, they do all those kind of things, but in that avoidance, they end up having this accumulative effect where they will let things go, let things go, let things go until they get to the point where it's like a pressure cooker and it all builds up and then they explode and they end up operating exactly like the person that they were trying to avoid operating like. And so they blow up and they get mad because they don't have the other tools that they need to be able to operate in a different way. So they default back to what they know, which might have been either abusive situations, and maybe it's not even a childhood thing. Maybe it's just their previous work environment, and the only time that they could get respect or get people to listen to them was when they raised their voice, right? And there's all kinds of things that go on in our childhood that maybe contribute to this. Maybe we don't listen to a parent until they lose their shit, right? Ask any mom with their kids. They asked 100 times nicely before they finally lose their shit and blow up, and now all of a sudden the kids are going to listen, right? There's a lot of different reasons that happen behind that. So it's not always trauma, but it is definitely dealing with emotions, dealing with our own inner work, and dealing with understanding where does this stuff come from. Okay? So we have this guy that every 3 to 4 days, or in a short period of time, no matter how many times you talk with him, he keeps defaulting back to this behavior of yelling at the team. And it can be easy to just say, well, you know what, they've decided, I've sat back, I've watched their behavior, I'm looking at their conditioning, and they just seem to like to do this. So, you know what, this isn't a good fit, I'm cutting them off, they're fired, whatever it is. You know, it's not a good fit, not a good alignment. Okay? And that's fair enough. You can absolutely do that in business and everything. But you need to be able to understand what, if you're going to really dig down to the root cause and corrective action, is what is causing this guy to get into a state of fear that he defaults back to that yelling behavior. He's going back to a comfort zone. He's going back to behaving in a way that was effective for him in a previous situation. The only reason he is not changing his behavior is because he does not have the tools that he needs that are effective, that will get him the right results. Okay? So, as a business owner, we have to come back and look at, well, what is possibly causing this guy to get triggered over and over and default back to that fear state of operating. And that is that anger, that explosive anger, yells at people. They are lacking the tools that they need to get the effective results. So, therefore, you have to ask, well, what are the effective results? Is it a certain KPI that they're trying to hit? Are they worried about losing face that you won't see them as effective? Are they afraid that they're going to lose their job because they're not doing a good enough job? And they see you as judge, jury, and executioner. So, if your team sees you as the judge, the jury, and the executioner, that alone is enough to cause them to operate from a place of fear. So the thing that businesses need to understand, and every business has this, every rule that has ever been put in place to provide some sort of structure is a way to protect ourselves, to protect our business, to ensure that it grows. The problem is, and this happens at every level, whether it's personal rules, whether it's business rules, whether it is government rules, you end up having so many rules in place that the rules that were set in place to prevent problems from happening actually end up becoming the thing that actually strangles the business, strangles the government, right? Strangles the relationship. So all of these rules that get put in place happen as a way as to prevent problems from happening, to provide that structure, but then sometimes then that structure ends up becoming the very thing that causes the problem, right? So these things are put in place because we fear these situations happening again. So on the business owner side, that is where the fear is, right? Is all the rules, the regulations, and the structure. Now, I understand that we need these things in order to run a functional business. It's just a matter of how much do we need in order for it to be effective, and are we evaluating, is it actually effective? Because when you guys first came together, you decided to hire this person. There was this magnetism, right? And by magnetism, they had something positive, you were lacking something, right? And it's when you have the positive energy and the negative energy, it pulls together and it creates this magnetism, and it's like, oh, we're in love, this is awesome, we're hiring you, you're going to help solve our problems. Because the only reason a business hires anybody is they're trying to solve a problem, right? So they're solving a problem, they need more time, they need to be able to hand over these certain tasks, these procedures, these things that need to get done in the business. And the business owner is buying back their time by hiring that person. So in the beginning, there was this love, there was this magnetism, this was great. You have these skill sets that I don't have the time for, right? You have this structure, you have this discipline, you have this organization, this is amazing, this is great. You have this military background, or you have this, ability to stay calm, cool, and collected, and this is amazing, right? And then what ends up happening is this person runs into a challenge that maybe they're not equipped to deal with. And this is going to happen as a business owner. You're going to run into a challenge that you weren't equipped to deal with, that you didn't anticipate. There are all these, and that will trigger certain emotions to come up, and as soon as we hit any unknown pattern, fear is an automatic reaction. It's like, what is this? I don't know what this is, right? So if we default to our previous patterns of what has worked for us in the past, that could mean that we maybe are using less than optimal ways of operating. And so when we operate from a place and we view this from a place of there are no enemies, and this is a problem if you're using a military structure in your business. And I know it's so tempting to use this because it's effective, it gets quick results, but there's also a friggin' body count that ends up happening. And you end up losing people, you end up hurting people, and military tactics are, there's acceptable losses, right? And if you want to operate your business that way, by all means, go ahead, operate your business that way. Probably you and I aren't going to be a fit. But if you want to operate your business in a different way, and you want to be able to break down some of these structures and be able to understand the emotions that are behind it, it requires inner work on your part. It requires your team to do that inner work and coming together to solve a problem, right? This is what love is, right? Coming together to solve that problem, that magnetism, right? You have different skills that I don't have the time for, right? That maybe I do understand it, but I don't want to get that involved in that, right? So as a leader, as a business owner, you have to be able to allow them some of those mistakes and deal with your own fears that come up with them doing things different, right? So maybe, I don't know, I know from me, I'll speak from my own perspective. When somebody yells, that can trigger some of the stuff I grew up with in childhood, where there was yelling, there was fighting, and all of that kind of stuff. And that brings up some certain fear in me, and then there's default operating modes that I go into, which is to shut down all emotion. And then I oftentimes will come across as cold and uncaring, and because it's not safe for me to feel my feelings, so I shut down, I become extremely logical, and I have no empathy, no compassion, it's just battle mode, right? It's just like there's no care, there's no concern, all of that kind of stuff. And then it's just logic, facts, figures, and there's no empathy, no love that comes from that. So that can be how, and I'm aware of how I operate when I'm in a mode of fear. So being aware of how you operate when you get into that mode of fear, maybe you shut down, right? Because the fourth stage is, maybe you go into people-pleasing mode. The 4 stages of anger, which I cover in my Facebook group training, and go to the happiness coach. That is there's 8 mini modules. They're maybe 10 to 15 minutes each, and I break down going through each of these training pieces, okay? So if I'm losing you, or if it's a little bit over the place, like I said, I'm trying to break this down in a way that makes sense, and hopefully you guys are tracking with this, okay? So understanding my own personal fear triggers and how I operate in a place of fear, and then also depending on how long you're in that state of fear. That fear trigger might be fear aggression that happens, that anger that comes out and goes, hey, wait a second, right? And so if it's that, then it's a very short term. It's very easy to deal with it when it's in that fear. So when you recognize somebody has been triggered and they're operating not as their best self, they're not operating from a place of love, they're operating from a place of fear, it's being able to identify that, understand where is that fear coming from, and then how to help them through that. Help them regulate their own emotions so they can step back and they can feel like they are safe, that they're not under threat. And then as a CEO or business owner, you want to be able to help them understand, where is this coming from? Maybe their yelling triggered your fear reaction, and now you're just all structure, all business, right? No care, compassion. You just operate exactly the way I want you to operate, or you're gone. That's it, right? And that is not a good way to operate, because eventually you'll get to a place, it's like, well, how many people can I fire before I end up having to do my own inner work and realize what's going on with me? So this works both ways, right? So recognizing your own fear as the business owner, what did they trigger in me? And then how do I help them? Because when I am coming from a place of security, when I am coming from a place of love and care and compassion, it's easy for me to slow down and recognize what's going on with the other person, that they're operating from a place of fear instead of a place of love. And when I can help them shift and make that shift from, okay, where is the fear coming from? And the problem is with business, it's like, yes, we do have certain KPIs that have to be hit, and if the business doesn't make money, and I'm sure the KPIs are put in place because if we follow these KPIs, these are the rules that we've put in place in business. If we follow these KPIs, then we will be able to make money. The business will thrive, the business will grow, expand. That's love. We help solve more problems for more people, and that is expansion. That is a love energy, right? And that is a growth energy. But when we put too many rules and regulations and structures in place, too many, there has to be some, but if we put too many and we rely too heavily on just those rules, those regulations, those structures, we will end up shooting ourselves in the foot, because we are dealing with human beings, the people that we work with. And even though you shut that person down, you're causing a fear effect in the rest of the organization now too, because now they're looking at you, if I don't follow the business owner's rules and regulations to a perfect T, then I'm going to be next on the chopping block. So you have inserted fear into your own business without realizing it, by relying so heavily and being so structured with the process, that now people are not in that creative mode. They're not in that problem-solving mode. They are in the, I better do exactly what I'm fucking told, or I'm going to be the next one that is taken out. And without knowing it, you have now created fear in your organization, and you're going to stifle your growth, and you won't know it until a longer period of time, until you're now looking at a change management process, trying to break down the barriers, trying to cultivate that creativity, that working together mentality of being able to grow and expand the business. So this is why it's really important to be able to look at our own inner work, doing this stuff, and really understanding there's only two ways to operate. You're either contracting and you're shutting down, you're structured, you're in fear, you've got all these rules and regulations trying to protect yourself from getting hurt, whether that's personally or your business. Or, which that is all an illusion. It is not real. We can work together and we can all solve problems. Now it takes both people to be able to do that. But us as business owners, as leaders, we absolutely have to do this ourselves first so we can set the example and we can avoid injecting fear into our business without knowing it. Okay? So hopefully this kind of made sense. I know it's a little all over the board, little post-it notes, conspiracy theory, kind of bullshit, whatever it is. Being able to understand these things and take these steps back is important to be able to do this in a way that we come together and solve these problems. Because if recognizing that this person yelling and seeing them hurting the rest of the team is triggering you and you're like, oh, I got to protect them, I got to protect the rest of the team, and that is great. But isolating and ostracizing, making this person the bad guy when originally they were the solution to your problem. Nobody comes in intending to fuck things up. They hit a place of fear that they didn't know how to move forward on. And they defaulted back to old behaviors that worked for them in the past, whether that comes from a family dynamic, a previous work environment, trauma, whatever it is, wherever it came from, isn't as important as understanding that this behavior is a trigger that they've defaulted to a fear pattern. This also, and the 4 stages of fear are anger, so that's the fight, flight. So if they're running, they're not doing the things that they need to do, they're anxious, they're avoiding, running all over the place, doing a million different things, spread too thin, that is still a fear response. Third one is freeze, where they're not doing anything, they're procrastinating, it's like, what the fuck are they doing? Why haven't they got this done? They're delaying, all of that kind of stuff. These are all tactics that apply to sales, they apply to business, they apply to change management, they apply to relationships, okay? That if you see these behaviors, you have to recognize them, that they are fear responses. And fourth one is the people pleasing, right? If they're in that people pleasing mode, they're just saying yes because they're too afraid to tell you the truth, and they're just telling you and trying to guess whatever it is. Well, what do they want to hear now? I don't know, so I'm just trying to tell them whatever they want to hear so that they don't get mad at me and they don't, crack the whip and they don't use these rules and regulations to beat me down, right? Because rules and regulations are put in place because you were hurt before, and you want to know if a business has been hurt, look at their rules, their regulations, their structures, and if it is got a ton of different rules and regulations and structures, they've been hurt a million times, and every one of those rules were put in place to prevent being hurt, and nobody reassesses whether or not they're still in that battle, whether that or they're just have PTSD and they don't know the war is over, right? So we have to look at these things. We have to look at rules and regulations. Do they still fit? Are they still necessary? Are they still working? Is the solution the right solution? If it's not, it may be time for a change management approach, so that you guys can go back to being happier. You can go back to being open and free and flowing, right? You can go back to working together collaboratively, that you guys are on the same team instead of treating each other like enemies and making this one the bad guy and that one the bad guy. And I'm going to add this in as another piece. Even if you are looking for a certain return on your investment, right? You know, I've invested this amount of time into this person. They haven't given me the amount back that I was expecting. And so that could trigger some fear with you of like, hey, you know what? I need to cut my losses. And maybe that's a fair assessment, right? Maybe that is what you need to do. I'm not going to argue that point. That might be the best approach, especially if you guys can't get back on the same page where you're back in a state of love and you can appreciate the differences that the other person brings to the organization. So if the gap has gotten too big, the weight has gotten too heavy, it may be time to separate. And that's okay. But do that out of a place of love for yourself, the business, and the other person. It's got to be a win-win-win all way around. And you're not doing it out of fear of like, this person's toxic, I'm cutting them out, this isn't good. You know, that is still coming from a place of fear. And I promise you, if you do that, the next person you hire, the cycle will repeat again. It will happen again because you haven't quite learned the lesson of the fact that you are getting triggered, that you are in a state of fear, and being able to put that to rest and understand where that's coming from for you. Because when you are operating from a state of strength, a state of love, the only thing that's real, then you can look at the situation and you know exactly what's going on with that person. You're not triggered, you're not in a state of fear. You know, okay, you just need to do these things. You know the tools to be able to help them move forward so that they're not blowing up, they're not yelling, and they're not doing those kind of things. You know, here's the things that you need to do in order to move forward, right? And it's easy for you. It's not even a second, oh yeah, that's easy, just do this. Oh, okay, great, they now do this and everything works fine. Guess what? They're not yelling anymore. But if they continue to be in that state, then the tools or the solutions that you've offered them aren't actually working. And they are ineffective. And us as leaders, as business owners, we have to look at that and go, oh shit, it's on me. Oh shit, I have, whatever my best ideas are, what worked for me doesn't appear to be working for this person. And there may be a multitude of reasons for it. Maybe they have gotten, or they've got you on such a pedestal, they're so afraid of being able to tell you the truth about something that they don't want to be judged, right? And if they fear your judgment, then that's fear. You have fear in your organization, and you're not going to get the best out of your people. So, guys, hopefully this was helpful. If you found this training useful, make sure you comment, join the Happiness Coach Facebook group, and go through and watch the mini 8-module training there that I break down these steps. Use these tools, and I would love to hear your feedback if you found this helpful, if you found this useful. There are ways to actually start changing these things, and there are ways to help bring you guys together so that you're back in love with your employees, and that when they come on board with you, that you guys are both learning and growing together, even past the original honeymoon phase of when an employee comes on board, and they start realizing that, you know, not everything is what they thought, and you start seeing not everything is what you thought with them, right? So that those pink cloud glasses come off, and then you have to start dealing with the hard stuff of relationships in business. And so guys, hopefully that was helpful, and if you want more of these kind of trainings, let me know, and I'll break down a particular situation, and we can go through how to move through these things. Okay? So with that, have a great week, and we'll talk to you later. Bye!